A gunshot shattered the winter silence, echoing across Thunder Valley. The wind howled mercilessly, whipping snow into blinding sheets as Jake Morgan stood on his cabin porch, blood dripping from a graze on his cheek. His Winchester rifle remained steady in his hands despite his exhaustion. Three mounted men approached through the blizzard, their horses snorting plumes of steam. "I'm only saying this once," Jake growled, chambering around with a decisive click. "One more step toward my property and I'll put you all on the ground." From inside the cabin came the desperate wail of a hungry infant. The tallest intruder removed his hat, revealing a jagged scar slashing through his left eye. "Heard your new wife is the witness who sent my brother to hang," he called, his voice cutting through the storm. "Give her up, Morgan. This ain't about you or that crying brat." Jake's jaw clenched as he leveled the rifle. "She's not here. The stagecoach driver remembers dropping her at your place," the scarred man sneered. "We both know she's inside. Hand her over, or we burn everything. Starting with that baby." Jake's finger tensed on the trigger. "Try it." But to understand how former Army scout Jake Morgan found himself facing down three killers in a blizzard, protecting a woman he barely knew, we need to go back 3 months. Thunder Valley, Wyoming, winter 1879. Jake Morgan knelt beside his wife's bed, his massive hands, once steady enough to track a man through a blizzard, now trembling as he clutched hers. Sarah's skin was already cooling, her eyes forever closed. "I promise," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'll protect her with everything I have." Everything! Behind him, Dr. Wilkins closed his medical bag with a solemn click. "The fever took her too fast, son. Nothing anyone could have done." In the cradle beside the bed, 3-month-old Emma slept, unaware she'd never know her mother. "She needs milk," the doctor said. "Martha Jenkins lost her baby last month. Her milk hasn't dried up yet." For 2 weeks, Martha made the journey through the snow to feed Emma. Then influenza swept through the Jenkins household. "Can't risk bringing it to your girl," she explained apologetically. "Try goat's milk." Jake, who'd survived 3 winters alone in the mountains tracking hostiles, who'd once cauterized his own arrow wound with a heated knife blade, now found himself defeated by something as simple as feeding an infant. He fashioned a nipple from soft leather, heating his blacksmith tools red hot to shape it properly. He mixed the goat's milk with sugar water as Martha had instructed. "Come on, little one," he coaxed, sitting by the fire, bouncing Emma gently as she turned her face away from the bottle, her cries growing weaker each day. "Damn it, girl," he whispered, rocking her. "Your pa's killed wolves with his bare hands. Why can't I keep one tiny girl alive?" By the 4th day of Emma's hunger, Jake saddled his stallion and rode through knee-deep snow to every homestead within 15 miles. The Dawsons had nothing to offer. The Hendersons were down with fever. Even Reverend Taylor's wife could only offer prayers. Jake returned home, his coat frozen solid, to find Emma's cries had weakened to whimpers, with hands that had never shaken during combat. He carved a desperate message into a wooden plank. "Need wet nurse. Infant hungry. Will pay any price." He hammered it to his fence post, each nail driven with the fury of a helpless man. That night, as the wind screamed like a wounded beast and Emma's hunger tore at his soul, Jake Morgan, former Army scout, the man who'd survived a Comanche ambush that killed 6 others, dropped to his knees beside his daughter's cradle and did something he hadn't done since childhood. He prayed. 3 sharp knocks at the door jerked Jake from his restless doze. Emma had finally exhausted herself into fitful sleep. Jake reached for his Colt, checking that it was loaded before approaching the door. He'd seen too many drifters prey on isolated ranchers to take chances. The knocking came again, more urgent this time. He cracked the door open, his hand on the pistol. Standing on his porch, drenched and shivering, was a woman, Her dark hair clung to a face that might once have been pretty before grief carved its hollow lines. A rifle shot cracked from the darkness beyond her. The bullet splintered the doorframe inches from Jake's head. The woman screamed and ducked. Jake yanked her inside, slamming and bolting the door in one fluid motion. "Get down," he ordered, dropping to a crouch beside the window. He peered out cautiously, but saw only swirling snow and darkness. "Who's after you?" he demanded, turning to the trembling woman. "I don't know," she gasped. "The stagecoach overturned 10 miles back. Driver said your ranch was the only shelter nearby." Her teeth chattered violently. "I saw your sign." From the back room, Emma's cry suddenly pierced the air, a desperate, hungry wail that changed everything. The woman's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her hand flew to her chest, where dark stains spread across her blouse. "You have a baby?" Her voice changed, something raw breaking through. Jake studied her, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "My daughter, 3 months old. Her mother died of fever." The woman's eyes never left the direction of Emma's cries. "My son was 4 months old when our stagecoach was attacked 6 weeks ago." Her voice cracked. "A stray bullet. He died in my arms." She unbuttoned her coat with trembling fingers, revealing the milk stains more clearly. "Since then, my body, it doesn't understand he's gone." Tears welled in her eyes. "Every day is torture, milk with no child to feed." Jake's hand remained near his pistol, his scout's instinct screaming caution even as hope flared. "Who fired that shot?" "I don't know," she repeated. "There were rumors of outlaws in these hills. The Wheeler gang." Jake's posture changed instantly. "Wheeler? Wolf-Eye Wheeler?" She nodded, surprised. "You know him. Every scout west of the Mississippi knows Wheeler," Jake said grimly. "Killed 3 of my men during an ambush years back. Never caught him." He holstered his gun slowly. "You have a name?" "Sarah. Sarah Harrison." Emma's cries grew more frantic. Sarah took a hesitant step toward the sound, then stopped, looking at Jake with a question in her eyes. "She won't take goat's milk," Jake said roughly. "Been trying for days." Sarah nodded once. "May I?" Jake led her to the cradle, watching as she lifted Emma with practiced hands. He positioned himself between them and the door, close enough to intervene but giving them space. "She's so light," Sarah whispered, alarmed. "How long since she's eaten properly?" 4 days. Sarah sat in the rocking chair by the fire, turning slightly away as she opened her blouse. Jake busied himself checking the windows and reloading his rifle. The cabin filled with sudden silence as Emma latched on, her desperate suckling the only sound besides the crackling fire and howling wind. Sarah's eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, whether to Jake or Emma wasn't clear. Jake moved to the window, staring out into the blizzard, where a shooter might still be waiting. "This arrangement works for us both," he said gruffly, "but I need to know exactly who's after you and why." Sarah looked up, her expression hardening. "James Wheeler killed my son. I watched him hang for it in Fort Laramie." Her voice dropped. "His brother Wolf-Eye swore revenge on all witnesses." Jake's hand tightened on his rifle. "Then I reckon we're both targets now." A week passed. The blizzard had subsided, leaving Thunder Valley buried under pristine snow. Inside Jake's cabin, a cautious routine had developed. Sarah stayed in the side room where Jake had built her a proper bed, sturdy pine with a real mattress. They spoke little, but their silent cooperation built something like trust. Sarah cared for Emma, cooked meals that reminded Jake what real food tasted like. In return, Jake hunted fresh meat and maintained vigilant watch. One morning, a howl echoed from the ridge behind the barn. Jake grabbed his rifle and was out the door before Sarah could speak. He found the wolf crouched over a dead calf, blood staining the snow crimson. The predator snarled, hackles raised, unwilling to abandon its kill. Jake raised his rifle, then paused. Behind the adult wolf, two cubs watched from the tree line, scrawny, half-starved things. He lowered his gun slightly, and in that moment of hesitation, the wolf lunged. Jake fired from the hip, the bullet grazing the wolf's shoulder. The wounded animal slammed into him, jaws snapping inches from his throat. They crashed into the snow, Jake's knife appearing in his hand as they rolled. The wolf's teeth tore through his coat sleeve, grazing flesh. Jake drove the knife upward, finding the soft spot behind the animal's jaw. One clean thrust and the struggle ended. He stood, breathing hard, blood seeping from his arm. The wolf cubs had vanished back into the forest. From the cabin porch, Sarah watched, Emma bundled against her chest. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," Jake said, though blood dripped from his fingertips. Later, as Sarah cleaned and bandaged his wound with unexpectedly skilled hands, Jake studied her. "Where'd you learn that?" "My father was a sheriff in Montana Territory," she replied. "He taught me more than just how to patch bullet holes." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" In answer, Sarah reached for Jake's Remington pocket pistol from the table. In one fluid motion, she checked the chamber, spun the cylinder, and closed it. "He taught me to shoot before I could read," she said quietly. Jake took the gun back. "Show me." He set up tin cans on fence posts 50 yards out. Sarah handled the weapon with unexpected familiarity, hitting 4 of 5 targets. "Not just a grieving mother after all," Jake said, the closest thing to approval he'd offered. "We all have our stories, Morgan," she replied. "Some just run deeper than others." The next day, Jake rode into town for supplies. Inside Donovan's general store, conversation halted when he entered. Men nodded tersely, women whispered behind gloved hands. "Heard you got yourself a nursemaid, Morgan," called Earl Simmons from behind the counter. "Mighty convenient arrangement." Jake ignored him, gathering the supplies he needed. "Woman shows up out of nowhere, grieving a dead baby," continued another voice. "Then Wheeler's boys start asking about her all over the territory. Seems mighty peculiar." Jake's hand tightened on the sack of flour he was examining. "You asked to see that dead baby's grave?" called Simmons with a smirk. "Or were you too busy with other matters?" Jake set down his purchases and crossed to Simmons in 3 long strides. He grabbed the man by his shirt front. "Sarah Harrison's son was killed during a stagecoach robbery. She's keeping my daughter alive while I hunt down the man who murdered 3 of my fellow scouts years back. You got something else to say about it?" A voice spoke from the doorway. "Actually, I do." Jake turned. The stranger wore a long black coat, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. But the jagged scar running through his left eye was unmistakable. "Wolf-Eye Wheeler," Jake said, releasing Simmons. "Morgan," Wheeler nodded, tobacco juice staining his beard. "Heard you were dead after that ambush at Red Fork." "Disappointed?" "Just surprised." Wheeler stepped inside, flanked by 2 hard-faced men. "I'm looking for a woman, witness against my brother before he was hanged." "Lot of women, lot of witnesses," Jake said evenly. Wheeler smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "This one's special. Only survivor who saw my brother's face. Stage driver remembers dropping her near Thunder Valley during the last blizzard. Said there was just one ranch out that way." The store had gone deathly quiet. "You harboring a witness, Morgan?" Wheeler's voice hardened. "Because that'd make you and me enemies again. And I don't think your little girl needs to lose another parent so soon." Jake's hand inched toward his holster. "Threaten my daughter again, and they'll hang you right beside your brother." Wheeler laughed. "Your woman's testimony hung my brother. Blood demands blood." He spat on the floor. "You've got until sundown tomorrow. Send her to me or I'm coming for both of you." Jake returned home to find Sarah singing softly to Emma. He bolted the door behind him. "Pack whatever you need," he ordered. "Wheeler's in town, with men. They're coming tomorrow." Sarah clutched Emma tighter. "I should leave. They want me. Not you or Emma. Jake shook his head. Temperatures dropping to 20 below tonight. You'd be dead by morning. He handed her the Remington. We stand better odds together. Night fell, stars piercing the black sky. Jake positioned himself by the window, Winchester ready. Sarah sat in the rocking chair, Emma asleep against her chest, the pistol within reach. Hours passed in tense silence. Just after midnight, the horses in the barn began to stir nervously. They're here early, Jake whispered. Seconds later, a bottle crashed through the window, flames erupting as the kerosene bomb exploded against the wall. Jake fired through the broken glass, satisfied when he heard a cry of pain. Get down, he shouted to Sarah, who was already moving to the back room with Emma. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Jake crawled to a different window and fired twice more. The front door splintered under a heavy boot. Jake swung his rifle like a club, catching a bearded man across the jaw. They grappled, crashing into the table. Jake's hand found his hunting knife, and he plunged it into the man's shoulder. The intruder howled, staggering back. A second man appeared in the doorway. Before Jake could react, a shot rang out from the back room. The man dropped, clutching his leg. Sarah stood in the bedroom doorway, Remington steady in her hand. Where's Wheeler? Jake demanded of the wounded intruder. His answer came as bullets tore through the cabin wall, one grazing Jake's arm. He hissed in pain but maintained his grip on the rifle. Outside, Wheeler's voice called through the night. Send her out, Morgan. This ain't your fight. It's been my fight since Red Fork, Jake shouted back, firing toward the voice. The standoff continued until dawn, when Wheeler and his remaining men retreated, taking their wounded. They'll be back, Jake said grimly, bandaging his arm, with more men. The next day, Jake rode into town to alert Sheriff Mills, leaving Sarah with strict instructions to bar the door and stay vigilant. The sheriff was skeptical. Wheeler's got warrants in 3 territories, but I can't spare men for a stakeout based on threats alone. He shot up my house, Jake protested, and you say you wounded 2 of his men, the sheriff countered. Sounds like you held your own. As Jake left the office, Reverend Taylor approached. Jake, I understand your arrangement with this woman has been beneficial for Emma, but at what cost? You've drawn Wheeler's gang to our peaceful community. What would you have me do, Reverend? Jake demanded. Turn her out? Let my daughter starve? The Williamsons lost their baby last year, the Reverend suggested. They'd take Emma, raise her properly. Perhaps that would be safer for all. Jake's face hardened. Emma stays with me, and so does Sarah, as long as she chooses. He rode home through gathering storm clouds, fury building with each mile. The valley that had been his home for 5 years had turned against him overnight. But worse was waiting at the ranch. The front door stood open, swinging in the wind. Inside, the cabin was empty. No Sarah, no Emma. Jake's heart hammered as he searched every corner, finding only a hastily scribbled note. The women from town came. Said the sheriff's considering taking Emma for her safety. They're right. I've brought this danger. Better I face Wheeler alone. I'm sorry. Outside, snow had begun falling again. Jake grabbed his tracking gear and mounted his horse. Sarah couldn't have more than an hour's head start, on foot with a baby in this weather. Using every tracking skill from his scout days, Jake followed their trail, not toward town, but toward the abandoned Silver Peak mine. Broken branches, disturbed snow, and a torn piece of fabric confirmed his path. Then he noticed the second set of tracks, 3 horses following the same trail. Wheeler, he muttered, spurring his horse faster. The old mining camp appeared through the swirling snow, abandoned shacks surrounding the dark mouth of the mine shaft. Jake dismounted, moving silently as he studied the scene. Boot prints led toward the main entrance. A twig snapped behind him. Jake spun, but too late. Something hard connected with his skull. sending him sprawling into the snow. "Looking for something, Morgan?" Wheeler's voice drifted through the haze of pain. Jake struggled to his knees, blood trickling into his eyes. Wheeler stood 10 feet away, rifle aimed casually at Jake's chest. Behind him, a younger man grinned, holding a bloody tree branch. "Where are they?" Jake demanded. "The woman and kid. My man's finding them in that shaft." Wheeler shrugged. "You and I have unfinished business first." Jake's hand inched toward the knife in his boot. "What business is that?" "You were the only survivor at Red Fork," Wheeler said coldly. "Should have finished you then." The man with the branch moved closer. Jake rolled suddenly, drawing his knife and slashing upward. The blade caught the man across the thigh, severing the femoral artery. Blood sprayed across the pristine snow as the man screamed. Wheeler fired, the bullet kicking up snow inches from Jake's head. Jake threw the knife, catching Wheeler in the shoulder. The outlaw staggered, firing wildly as Jake tackled him into a snowbank. They grappled in the snow, Jake's greater strength against Wheeler's desperate fury. Jake slammed the man's gun hand against a rock until the weapon fell, then delivered a crushing blow to Wheeler's scarred face. "Where's your other man?" Jake growled, pinning Wheeler down. Wheeler spat blood. "Finding the woman. Gonna make her watch what happens to that baby before he kills her." Jake knocked Wheeler unconscious with the butt of his own gun, then sprinted toward the mine shaft. Inside, darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet. "Sarah!" he called, his voice echoing down the abandoned tunnels. A faint cry answered. Not Sarah, but Emma. Jake moved deeper into the mine, senses heightened by years of tracking. The passage forked. From the left came another cry. Jake turned that way, moving faster despite the danger of cave-ins. He found them in a small chamber. Sarah huddled against the wall, clutching Emma to her chest. Her eyes were wild, unfocused. Standing over them was Wheeler's third man, revolver aimed at Sarah's head. "Back off, Morgan," the man ordered. "Wolf-Eye wants her alive, but the kid's negotiable." "Wheeler's dead," Jake lied evenly. "Your friend's bleeding out in the snow." "You're lying," the man snarled, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Jake took a step forward. "You think I'd come in here without handling them first?" The outlaw's attention wavered for just a second, enough for Sarah to drive her knee upward into his groin. As he doubled over, Jake lunged, crashing into him with the full force of his body. They slammed against the mine wall, the outlaw's gun discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. Jake drove his fist into the man's face repeatedly until he slumped unconscious. Jake turned to Sarah, who was rocking back and forth, murmuring to Emma, "Sarah, it's me. It's Jake." She looked up, her eyes clearing slightly. "I had to run," she whispered. "The women said I brought this on you, that you'd lose Emma because of me." Jake checked Emma. The baby was cold but breathing steadily. "You don't belong here," Sarah continued, tears freezing on her cheeks. "But Emma does. I couldn't let them take her too." "Nobody's taking either of you," Jake said firmly. "Not Wheeler, not the town, not anyone. But we need to move now, before the storm gets worse." He helped Sarah to her feet, wrapped his coat around her and Emma, and led them back through the mine shaft. Outside, the blizzard had intensified. "Can we make it home?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible above the wind. Jake's arm tightened around her shoulders. "We'll make it." And so we returned to where our story began. Jake Morgan on his cabin porch with blood on his face, Winchester in hand, facing down Wolf-Eye Wheeler and his two new recruits from a nearby outlaw camp. Wheeler had escaped from the mine during the blizzard. Now they were back, more determined than ever. "Heard your new wife is the witness who sent my brother to hang," Wheeler called. "Give her up, Morgan. This ain't about you or that crying brat." Jake's finger tensed on the trigger. "Try it." Wheeler's scarred face twisted in a smile. "Blood demands blood, Morgan. You know how this works." Behind Jake, the cabin door opened slightly. Sarah stood there, Remington in hand. "Get inside," Jake muttered without turning. "3 against 1 are bad odds," she replied quietly. "3 against 2 ain't much better," Jake countered. Wheeler's patience ended. "Enough talk!" He drew his revolver with lightning speed, firing as Jake dove aside. The bullet splintered the porch railing. Jake rolled, coming up with the Winchester at his shoulder, and fired. Wheeler's horse reared as the bullet grazed its flank, throwing the outlaw to the ground. The other men opened fire, forcing Jake and Sarah back into the cabin. Bullets thudded into the walls and door frame. "The back window," Jake shouted over the gunfire. "Circle around through the trees." Sarah nodded, moving toward the rear of the cabin, while Jake provided covering fire. Outside, Wheeler and his men had taken positions behind the water trough and woodpile. One tried to approach from the side, but Jake's shot sent him scrambling back. "You can't hold out forever, Morgan," Wheeler called. "We got all day." Jake checked his ammunition. 12 rounds for the Winchester, maybe 20 for the Colt. Not enough for a prolonged siege. A shot rang out from behind the barn. Sarah's position. One of Wheeler's men cried out in pain. Jake used the distraction to dash to the side of the porch. Gaining a better angle, he fired twice, forcing Wheeler deeper behind cover. The firefight continued. Jake took a bullet to the thigh, the impact knocking him against the cabin wall. Blood soaked his pants as he limped back to cover. From her position near the barn, Sarah had a clear shot at the third man, but hesitated. He was young, barely 20. Her hesitation cost her. Wheeler spotted her movement and fired, the bullet splintering wood inches from her head. She ducked down, but Wheeler was already advancing, using the young outlaw as cover. Jake saw the danger, but couldn't get a clean shot. His wounded leg buckled as he tried to move. "Sarah!" he shouted in warning. Wheeler reached the barn corner. Sarah was trapped, pinned down with nowhere to retreat. "Found you," Wheeler growled, raising his gun. A rifle shot cracked from the hill behind the cabin. Wheeler staggered, dropping his weapon as blood bloomed on his shoulder. Reverend Taylor stood on the ridge, rifle still aimed, flanked by Sheriff Mills and several townsfolk. "Seems I was wrong about leaving you to handle this yourself, Morgan," the sheriff called, riding forward with his deputies. Wheeler reached for his fallen gun. Sarah stepped out. Remington aimed steadily at his head. "For my son," she said quietly. Wheeler froze, then slowly raised his hands. As the sheriff's men took Wheeler and his remaining partner into custody, Jake limped to Sarah's side. "You came after us," she said, her voice unsteady. "After I ran with Emma." Jake winced as he put weight on his wounded leg. "Wasn't about to lose both of you." Reverend Taylor approached, shame evident on his face. "Jake, we were wrong. The town was afraid, but that's no excuse for turning our backs on neighbors. Fear makes cowards of good men," Jake said simply. Sheriff Mills nodded toward town. "The women who scared Sarah off will answer for it." He looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, I'll need your formal statement about the stagecoach robbery, but it can wait until Morgan here gets patched up." Jake looked at the gathering townsfolk, some of whom had shunned him days before. "Convenient timing. Don't be too hard on them," Mills said quietly. "Fear makes folks do strange things, but seeing a man stand up for what's right, that reminds them who they want to be." 2 years later, spring had come to Thunder Valley. The ranch house had doubled in size with a proper bedroom for Emma and a nursery for the baby Sarah now carried. The herd had grown too, requiring 2 hands to help Jake manage the expanding operation. Jake stood at the newly whitewashed fence, watching Emma toddle across the yard, her small boots leaving perfect prints in the mud. At 3 years old, she had her mother's dark hair, but Jake's stubborn determination. "Again, Pa!" she demanded, holding up her small wooden pistol that Jake had carved for her. "Steady your arm," Jake instructed, kneeling beside her. "Both eyes open. That's my girl." Emma lined up her shot at the row of tin cans Jake had set on the fence and made a pow sound, mimicking the recoil perfectly. "You're teaching her early," Sarah observed, joining them with one hand resting on her swollen belly. "Just like your father taught you," Jake replied. "In this country, knowing how to shoot might save her life someday, like it saved ours." Sarah handed him a telegram. "Just came from town. Wheeler's appeal was denied. Hanging set for next month in Cheyenne." Jake nodded, tucking the paper away without comment. "Does it bother you?" Sarah asked. "That he'll hang for the stagecoach robbery, not for what he did to us?" "Justice doesn't always wear the face we expect," Jake replied, "but it finds its way." They walked together toward the small plot behind the house, where two wooden crosses stood, one for Jake's first wife, one for Thomas, the son Sarah had lost. Fresh wildflowers adorned both graves. "I still see him sometime," Sarah admitted. "Thomas, I mean. But now he's smiling." Jake squeezed her hand. "That's how we know they're at peace." Back at the house, Jake placed the Winchester that had defended their home in a display case he'd built above the fireplace. The weapon would stay there, a reminder of battles fought and won, unless need arose again. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Knocking on a stranger's door that night?" Sarah smiled, watching Emma chase a butterfly in circles. "Not for a second." Jake pulled her close, his hand resting protectively over their unborn child. "We can't choose the storms that hit us," he said quietly, "but we can choose who stands beside us through them." Emma ran to them, breathless with excitement, arms reaching upward. Jake lifted her onto his shoulders, her small hands gripping his hair for balance. "In this world," Jake said, looking at the horizon, "a man has two things, his word and his gun. I've kept both." Together the three of them gazed toward the mountains, where Thunder Valley spread before them, green and full of promise. But in this untamed country, peace never lasts forever. On the distant horizon, a stagecoach was making its way toward them, carrying a passenger that would soon shatter their hard-won tranquility. Sarah's brother, long thought dead in the same robbery that took her son. If this tale of survival against the odds stirred something in you, hit that subscribe button. The frontier holds 1,000 stories of men standing tall against impossible odds. And here at Wild West Tales, we're just getting started. Next week, we ride to Montana Territory, where a former cavalry officer must choose between gold and honor when a mining company threatens the last sacred ground of the Blackfoot tribe. Remember, it's not the size of the storm that matters, but the strength of the man who faces it.